Generate Chapter 1 of a new story entitled Billionaire Sheikh pretends to date his new maid to escape arranged marriage and falls for her. The narration must be in English, written in the third-person past tense, with approximately 500 words, following a dramatic, romantic, intense, and immersive style true to the Billionaire Sheikh universe. Base the story on the premise: the billionaire sheikh, burdened by the weight of an imminent arranged marriage designed to secure political alliances, concocts a daring plan to escape his fate. He pretends to date his new maid, a clever and determined woman who conceals her own struggles beneath a humble exterior. As their fake relationship attracts scandal and gossip, the sheikh finds himself drawn not only to her beauty, but to her resilient spirit and sharp wit, qualities that challenge his preconceived notions of loyalty and love. Amid whispered secrets and the opulence of palace life, their charade gradually blurs the line between pretense and genuine affection. Yet the sheikh grapples with conflicting duties to his family, to tradition, and to his own heart. Unexpected obstacles arise when hidden truths from the maid's past threaten to unravel their fragile alliance, forcing both to confront fears and desires long suppressed. As the pressure of anticipated marriage mounts and court intrigues close in, the sheikh must decide whether to surrender to societal expectations or risk everything for a chance at true love with the woman who was once just his servant. This delicate dance between deception and passion sets the stage for a gripping tale of sacrifice, trust, and unexpected romance. The chapter must include 1. An immediate, powerful hook within the first 50 to 70 words, introducing the billionaire sheikh and the gravity of the central conflict in a dramatic and striking tone. 2. A quick yet immersive establishment of the setting, the luxurious and traditional emirate, and the palace environments, evoking the exoticism and power associated with the sheikh. 3. Vivid introduction of the sheikh's emotional state and personality, his coldness, tedious wealth, and the burden of the arranged marriage, and of the heroine, who despite her humble and newly arrived status, shows intelligence, determination, and carries secrets. 4. Exposition of the main conflict, the sheikh's audacious plan to pretend dating the new maid to avoid the political union, revealing the start of their charade and the spark of tension between them. 5. Initial development of their dynamic, blending challenge, curiosity, and subtle attraction, building emotion and anticipation. 6. A powerful and unexpected twist before the chapter's close, a detail or event linked to the maid's past, or an untimely consequence of the fake relationship that leaves the sheikh shaken and the audience eager for the next chapter. 7. Closing with a thematic call to action, CTA, in English, inviting viewer interaction with a style fitting the sheikh's universe, modeled after the reference channel. Example: before the next secret of this vast emirate unfolds, make sure you're already part of our caravan of stories. Many fates are yet to be sealed, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Hit the like button if this sheikh's heart has already intrigued you. Comment below, where are you watching this saga from, and what twist do you expect next? Your passion for these dramas is what inspires us to keep going. Thank you for being with us. Writing guidelines for the chapter. A. Evocative emotional intensity. Deliver deep emotional intensity, desire, fear, hope, anger, veiled longing, doubt, using direct verbs and concrete adjectives, so the reader feels each moment with real and dramatic weight. B. Engaging rhythm and cadence. Use short paragraphs, maximum 3 lines, and alternate between richly descriptive scenes and poignant, subtext-laden dialogues. Ellipses to build tension are encouraged. C. Immersive sensory description. Paint the setting with vivid details. The glint of gold, the scent of incense, the contrast between desert silence and palace whispers, luxurious and austere textures, to transport the reader instantly into the Sheikh's world. Subtle cinematic feel. Suggest narrative camera shifts between grand, wide shots and emotional close-ups on characters to create dynamism. E. Atmosphere thick with emotion and tension. Spotlight internal conflict, furtive glances, loaded silences, quickened pulses, and the weight of decisions revolving around power, tradition, and oppression and passion. F. Authentic and plausible impact. The final twist must be believable within the melodrama genre, surprising and gripping, never a cheap cliché. G. Contrast of apparent power and emotional vulnerability. Show how the Sheikh's powerful facade is shaken by proximity to the heroine, and how she reveals strength amid vulnerability. H. Absolute prohibitions. Avoid lists, disconnected reflections, overly formal, repetitive or archaic language. Exclude structural marks, chapter labels, greetings, intros or outros. Maintain fluid, pure, immersive narration. Ensure all narration is fluid, emotionally deep, and consistent in past tense third person, focusing on the inner and outer emotional experiences of the billionaire sheikh and his new maid. The output must be the fully formed prompt, exactly as above, designed to guide a specialist scriptwriter, the Sultan of Words. To create this Chapter 1 with maximum retention and engagement, fully respecting the genre's context, tone, and style. No direct narrative text is to be included in this output, only this detailed prompt instruction. The glistening chandeliers cast a golden glow across the vast hall, yet the weight of impending duty pressed heavily on him. The billionaire sheikh stood motionless, the burden of an arranged marriage, a political alliance he could neither escape nor accept, sealing his every breath like the desert heat outside the palace walls. Tonight, beneath layers of silk and gold, a plan as dangerous as the shifting sands was beginning to take form. The palace, a labyrinth of marble and ornate tapestries, exhaled the scent of frankincense and rosewater, sanctuaries of power draped in opulence. Footsteps echoed softly down the corridors as servants scurried to their tasks, whispers of court intrigue trailing behind them. In this gilded cage, the sheikh's soul felt both mighty and shackled. He was a monarch to many, yet a prisoner to tradition. His eyes, dark and stormy, hid a coldness bred from years of expectations worn like armor. behind that impregnable facade, stirred a restless mind, one eager to revolt against the chains of duty. And then came the new maid, her presence quietly disruptive. She carried herself with an undeniable poise, despite her humble station, her eyes sharp with intelligence and determination. Her past, shrouded in shadows, flickered like a secret flame beneath her composed exterior. He remembered the audacity of his plan, the masquerade, set in motion in a desperate bid to avoid the suffocating bonds of his forthcoming wedding. Pretending to court this new maid, to outsiders a scandalous distraction, but to him a calculated shield. But the more he observed her, the more the lines blurred between pretense and something dangerously real. That evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, he sought her out in the servants' quarters. She was folding linens with meticulous care, a faint crease of concentration between her brows. "You understand what I am asking," he said, his voice low, yet commanding, rippling with undercurrents of vulnerability. She met his gaze, eyes unwavering yet quietly defiant. "A game of shadows, is it? You want me to be the face of your rebellion, but only if I play my part perfectly." A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. No one before had dared to speak to him like that. Perfectly, yes. But remember, every mask can slip. Her laugh was soft, laced with mystery. Perhaps some masks suit us better than our own faces. Hours slipped away as they negotiated terms, cloaked in half-truths, each word charging the air between them. In the weave of veiled threats and tentative alliances, see, a flicker of something neither could deny sparked. A magnetic tension thick enough to carve into the stone walls that enclosed them. Yet beneath her sharp wit and witty retorts, he caught glimpses of concealed wounds. A hesitation when the palace's shadows stretched long. A tightening of her jaw when the name of her past lingered unspoken. He sensed that she, too, was a prisoner, held hostage not by wealth nor crowns, but by secrets yet to unravel. Days passed, and their fake courtship became the whispered scandal everyone awaited. The corridors thrummed with gossip, jealous glances from nobles, and cautious smiles from those who feared the Sheikh's unpredictable whims. But behind the public charade, their nightly encounters grew potent with unspoken yearnings and fragile trust. One night, as they shared a rare moment outside the prying eyes of the palace, a soft breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the garden. He dared to reach for her hand, a bold defiance of his own vows and fears. Her fingers trembled just before they met his, and for a breathless second, the boundary between master and maid dissolved. But as their lips hovered on the brink of a chance, stolen from fate, a sudden commotion shattered their fragile bubble. A breathless messenger arrived, his expression grave and eyes wide with disbelief. "Your Highness," the man stammered, "there is news from the outer district. Someone matching the description of the maid was seen near the governor's mansion with a wanted man." The Sheikh's gaze snapped to the woman, whose hand lingered in his. Her face, drained of color, eyes wide and bursting with secrets, begging for release. The palace, once a haven of gleaming majesty, suddenly seemed a cage too narrow to hold the storm now brewing between them. The delicate balance of their deception teetered on the edge of ruin, and with it, everything the Sheikh had fought to protect. An unspoken question clawed at his heart. Who was this woman really? And what risks had he invited into his world by letting her in? The shadows of the past were closing in, and the Sheikh knew the next dawn could shatter their fragile alliance forever. A heavy silence settled over the sprawling palace as the messenger's words echoed like thunder in the Sheikh's ears. The garden, once a refuge bathed in moonlight and perfumed jasmine, now felt like a trap closing in around them. The woman, his supposed accomplice in this reckless charade, stood frozen, her eyes a storm of fear and defiance. His gaze hardened, the flicker of doubt morphing into a blaze of suspicion. Who was she, really? What shadowy threads from a forsaken past had entwined themselves around the fragile alliance they had forged? The thought dug deep into his mind, shattering the tentative trust he had begun to nurture. The palace's opulent walls, heavy with centuries of tradition and whispered secrets, pressed down on him with renewed weight. No longer was this merely a game to divert him from an arranged marriage. It was becoming a perilous dance on the edge of disaster. He stepped closer, the glint of gold on his cuff, catching the dim light as his fist clenched silently. "Tell me everything," he commanded, voice low but sharp, slicing through the thick air like a desert blade. The messenger swallowed hard, eyes darting nervously between the Sheikh and the woman at his side. Reports say a woman matching her description was seen near the governor's mansion with a known smuggler, a fugitive wanted for crimes against the state. A cold dread coiled tight in the Sheikh's chest. The inexorable consequences of his reckless gamble now loomed like a viper ready to strike. The maid's composure cracked for a fleeting second. Her hands curled into fists, knuckles white beneath the fine but worn fabric of her sleeves. She dared not meet his gaze. "What are you hiding?" His voice was barely more than a growl. Her lips parted. The words caught somewhere between truth and deception. I never wanted you to find out like this." The tension twisted between them, a knife sharpened on unspoken fears and mounting desperation. He wanted to believe in her strength, in the flickers of humanity beneath her guarded exterior. But every secret was a brushfire threatening to engulf the fragile bond. They could collapse under the weight of one shattered trust. The grand hall was silent, its cool marble floors reflecting the unease pooling in the Sheikh's dark eyes. Outside, the desert wind whispered against the palace, carrying the scent of storms yet to come. "I demanded honesty from you," he said, each word a strike against the fragile veneer of their alliance. Not shadows and half-truths. Her breath caught, pain flashing through her eyes like lightning across a darkening sky. "I had no choice. They'll kill me if they find me." His heart clenched, despite his growing fury. He saw, for the first time, the raw vulnerability beneath the mask she wore so well. A prisoner not just of circumstance, but of dark enemies lurking beyond the walls of his gilded cage. The sheikh's mind raced. The arranged marriage, the palace intrigues, his desperate ploy to escape, everything paled against this revelation. Here was a woman forged by pain, caught in a vicious web where even he might not be able to protect her. Yet, despite the storm of doubts, a flicker of fierce protectiveness ignited within his chest. She was no longer merely his pawn or a shield from duty. She was the fragile pulse of rebellion against the suffocating expectations that bound him. As the distant stars blinked silently over the desert horizon, the sheikh reached out once more. His fingers brushed the side of her face, not in command but in a tentative gesture of solidarity. Her eyes met his tentatively, raw, pleading, yet defiant. A silent promise passed between them, survival at any cost. But just as the fragile silence settled, a sharp rap at the ornate door fractured their moment like glass. A trusted court advisor appeared, face grim shadowed by concern. "Your Highness, urgent news," he said quietly. "Your mother is here. She insists on speaking with you immediately about the wedding arrangements and the rumors already swirling around you and your new maid." The sheikh's jaw tightened. The game was no longer his to control. He turned back to the woman, no longer just a stranger or a servant, but a confounding enigma tangled in his fate. The weight of the crown pressed between them, but beneath it, something unyielding took root. A bond forged in defiance and secrets, ready to either save or shatter them both. The night whispered of what was to come, but only one truth was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of destiny pressed down harder than ever as the sheikh closed the heavy palace doors behind the court advisor. The whispered words about his mother's arrival and the rumors twisting through the gilded halls tangled in his thoughts, a snare tightening around his chest. His gaze flickered to the woman who had become much more than an accomplice in his reckless ruse. A woman cloaked in secrets and silent strength, now standing on the edge of ruin. Her hands trembled slightly, the pale moonlight catching the fragile sheen of sweat along her brow. Every breath she took seemed measured, as though she could sense the fault lines cracking beneath their fragile alliance. The palace, grand and imposing, suddenly felt like a cage, suffocating and relentless. Outside, the desert air was cool and unforgiving, carrying distant echoes of storms, yet to rip through the sands. He stepped closer, the glint of gold on his cuff catching the soft candlelight, as his voice lowered to a razor's edge. "Tell me everything. No more games. No more shadows." Her eyes, their depths previously unreadable, strained with a mix of defiance and desperation. She swallowed hard, biting back words that trembled on her lips. "There is a man I tried to escape. He's a smuggler, dangerous, but we share a past I wanted to bury." A long tension hung between them, heavy and suffocating, breaking only when the distant echo of approaching footsteps reached their ears. The sheikh's muscles tensed, every instinct primed for the inevitable confrontation. The court advisor glanced away, unwilling or unable to meet the electric fury simmering in the sheikh's gaze. "You are playing a perilous game," the sheikh murmured, voice low but laced with an unmistakable edge of warning. "The man who hunts you could bring down everything, the palace, my family, and the fragile alliance forged between us. Her jaw clenched, but when she finally met his eyes, what he saw was not fear, but the fierce flame of survival. "I never chose this life," she whispered, her voice raw yet steady. "But I will fight to keep my freedom, even if it means standing against kings." For a heartbeat, the coldness in him thawed, replaced by something primal, something that threatened to undo the very walls he'd built around his heart. She was no longer just a maid in his palace, a convenient mask to evade betrothal. She was the storm raging at his door, untamed and dangerous, igniting every corner of his being. But duty was an unyielding anchor. The wedding, the alliance, loomed like a shadow over every whispered confession and stolen glance. His mother's arrival was a cruel reminder that the path he desperately longed to abandon was narrowing, suffocating his last breaths of freedom. The clatter of a heavy object falling in the hallway startled them both. A servant appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, clutching a folded piece of paper. With careful hands, he extended the note towards the sheikh. Unfolding the parchment, the sheikh's dark eyes scanned the hastily written words. Names, dates, a location. The governor's mansion, once again. A coded warning from an unknown source, pointing to the smuggler's next move, and a trail that led dangerously close to the palace itself. His heart hammered, not with fear, but with a growing certainty. The maid's face paled as she read the note over his shoulder, her body stiffening like a drawn bowstring. "They're closer than we thought," she breathed, voice barely above a whisper. "If they find me, if they find us, everything will burn." In the silence that followed, the sheikh stepped even closer, his presence a fortress and a threat. "Then we fight, together." For a flicker of time, the stark divide between master and servant dissolved. His hand rose, fingertips grazing the delicate curve of her jaw, tracing the sharp determination etched there. Somewhere beneath the layers of fear and defiance, a fragile trust began to take root, an ember glowing fiercely against the encroaching darkness. But before either of them could surrender to that fragile moment, the palace strategy was interrupted by the sudden arrival of an unexpected figure. The doors burst open, and a woman stepped across the threshold, regal and commanding, yet shadowed by an unmistakable cold fury. The sheikh's mother, her sharp gaze swept the room, landing abruptly on the maid, her son's chosen mask against tradition, and the crack in the facade widened. The empire she controlled was suddenly at war with her own blood's reckless rebellion. With a slow, deliberate step, she closed the distance between them, voice icy and hard as flint. "You have crossed a line, and soon the entire emirate will know. This charade of yours will not stand." The sheikh squared his shoulders, the golden embroidery of his robe catching the flickering light, symbols of power and expectation heavy on his frame. His voice was calm but resolute, the first true defiance to escape his lips in years. "This is not just a game, Mother. What I choose now will change us all." The grandmother's eyes narrowed, a storm simmering beneath her poised exterior. Then be prepared, son. The price for your rebellion will be as high as the crown you wear. Behind her, shadows shifted, whispers of court intrigue swirling like desert dust, ready to consume. The maid's gaze locked with the Sheikh's, unspoken promises passing between them, of battle, of survival, and of a love that might yet rise above the ruin. But as the grand doors slammed shut, sealing the confrontation, a chilling truth echoed in the Sheikh's mind. Some secrets were not meant to be buried, and the storm they had unleashed would soon rain fire upon them all. The heavy echo of the closing doors lingered, swallowing the fragile quiet that had hovered barely a breath ago. The Sheikh stood motionless, a pillar carved of rigid gold and unyielding duty, while the weight of his mother's condemnation pressed down like the desert sun, scorching and unavoidable. Her presence was a dark tide, battering the fragile ship of his rebellion, threatening to unravel every carefully laid plan veiled beneath layers of silk and deception. He turned slowly, eyes dark wells of conflicted fire, landing on the woman who once seemed just a convenient shield, now a living tempest wrapped in secrets and silent defiance. Her gaze met his, flickers of storm and flickering vulnerability, wrapped tight beneath veils of steel. That single look seized his breath. How quickly the distance between master and servant dissolved into something raw, dangerous, and impossible to command. "My son," the steady, cold voice cut through the charged silence. "Your game threatens the very foundation of our family. This charade with your maid, it will bring ruin. Are you ready to sacrifice everything for this reckless folly?" He clenched his jaw, regal posture unbending, but eyes betraying a tremor of doubt. "I choose what I must. This is no longer about duty alone." His voice was low, threading between whisper and command, a fragile rebellion wrapped in every syllable. A subtle shift rippled through the maid. Her hands trembled and her breath caught, a delicate bird trapped between fear and fierce resolve. In this moment, stripped of all pretense, dawned their fragile alliance, bound by more than mere strategy. Unspoken promises surged like desert winds as she stood toe-to-toe with the Empire's heir, no longer merely a pawn, but a vital piece in a game far deadlier than either dared admit. Outside, the desolate palace gardens shimmered beneath a blanket of stars, their cool light indifferent to the wars waged within stone walls heavy with history. The faint scent of night-blooming jasmine hung thick in the air, an echo of beauty and softness amid the looming threat. As the Sheikh's gaze sharpened, a servant entered hastily, breath ragged, clutching a sealed parchment pressed tight in trembling hands. With a wordless gesture, he offered the message to the Sheikh, whose fingers closed around the scroll with a grip that tightened like a vice. Unfolding the parchment, the Sheikh's eyes blazed over the hastily scrawled ink. Names, dates, whispered threats, traced in ink, darkened like spilled secrets. The smuggler, the shadow from the maid's past, was moving closer, his dangerous net tightening around the palace itself. The ruler's breath hitched, a storm gathering beneath his calm exterior. For all the iron will and centuries of tradition that girded the walls around him, the threat was intimate now, a fire invading the sanctity of his sanctuary, shaking the bedrock of his carefully controlled life. Her face paled beside him, eyes wide and haunted as the cold truth settled across the room. "They are hunting me," she confessed, voice scarcely above the rustle of silk. "And if they find me here, if they find us, it will be the end of everything." The sheikh stepped forward, the weight of his power steady beneath the flickering lamplight, bridging the fragile gulf between them. His hand rose in tentative solidarity, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. A silent vow amid the storm. "Then we stand together. They will burn nothing as long as I breathe." But before the fragile moment could solidify, the heavy thuds of iron-shod footsteps echoed down the marble corridors, the unmistakable heralds of court intrigue, and the sharp, commanding voice of a new challenger. The palace doors burst open yet again, admitting a figure draped in silence and authority. The sheikh's gaze flicked involuntarily to the newcomer, an envoy from a rival faction within the emirate, cloaked in shadows and menace. His eyes, narrow and calculating, locked onto the maid with a predator's hunger. "Your Highness," the stranger intoned smoothly, voice silk masking steel. "Rumors of your liaison have reached those who watch the balance of power closely. Your frivolous games may have unintended consequences for all of us." A seismic charge exploded in the room. The sheikh's pulse thundered, every nerve alight with the raw electricity of a battle that had suddenly extended beyond palace walls and whispered secrets. His hand faltered at her hair, fingers stiffening before gripping firm. The maid's gaze glinted defiantly, yet betrayed a sliver of fear beneath the veneer. The stranger's words were no idle threat. They were a declaration of war on both their fates. Time compressed, the gilded chamber narrowed into a crucible of tension and impending ruin. The sheikh felt that weight of legacy, love, and treason squeeze around his chest. His voice, when it came, was a low growl wrapped in steel and sorrow. "This ends now. We will choose how our story is written." Behind them, the palace shadows deepened, swirling like desert storms gathering on the horizon. The game had changed. There was no turning back. And beneath the surface, a secret, long buried, stirred. A whisper from the past that promised to shatter the fragile bonds before the first light of dawn. The air inside the grand chamber grew thicker with every measured breath the sheikh took. Each one weighted not only by the legacy he bore, but by the shattering revelations that now clawed at his resolve. His mother's icy condemnation had fallen like a blade, severing any illusion of control he once held. Her voice still echoed in the silence, a reminder that the walls of the palace were no sanctuary from the storm raging in his heart. He turned slowly, each step deliberate, his gaze locked on the woman who had become the center of this tempest. No longer merely a mask to hide behind, she stood with a fierce quietude that both infuriated and fascinated him. Her eyes bore into his with a mixture of defiance and vulnerability, a forbidden dance of strength and fear. The air between them shimmered with unspoken words, a tension sharp enough to slice through the heavy silks and embroidery that wrapped them both. "There is no turning back," he said, voice low but resolute, the weight of command mingling with a rare tremor of uncertainty. "This is more than a game now. You brought your past into this palace, and with it, a danger I cannot ignore." Her lips pressed into a hard line, her fingers curling into fists. "My past is not a choice I made, but I will not let it destroy me or you," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper, yet firm enough to carry across the cavernous room. "I'm not the scared girl who arrived at your door. I'm the woman who will face whatever comes." The Sheikh's dark eyes softened for a fleeting moment, a crack in the armor forged from years of obligation and isolation. He stepped forward, the glint of gold on his cuff catching the flickering candlelight. His hand reached out, hesitating just before it brushed against her cheek, a touch that held the promise of both solace and claim. But the fragile moment shattered as the heavy doors creaked open once more, and a new presence filled the room. A man cloaked in shadowed authority entered, the leader of a faction within the Emirate's court, his gaze sharp and calculating. He moved with predatory grace, his eyes lingering on the Maid with an unsettling intensity that sent a chill racing along the Sheikh's spine. "Your Highness," the newcomer began, voice smooth yet edged with menace, "rumors of your liaison have stirred the sands of power. They threaten to unsettle alliances that have stood for generations." The Sheikh's jaw clenched. Each word was a gauntlet thrown at his feet, a direct challenge to the fragile rebellion he had nurtured. His fingers tightened involuntarily at her hair, grounding her and himself amidst the rising tempest. The Maid met the man's gaze with a spark of unyielding fire, though a flicker of fear betrayed her composed facade. This was a game played with razor-thin edges. One misstep, and everything would unravel. "The palace is no longer just walls and gold," the Sheikh declared, voice low and fierce. "It is the battlefield where our fates will be forged." The intruder's smile was thin, a blade disguising itself as silk. "Wars have already begun, sire. You have chosen sides in this fight, whether willingly or not." Outside, the desert wind howled against the palace walls, its mournful song carrying the promise of chaos. The space compressed into a crucible, every heartbeat pounding like a drum heralding war. The Sheikh's mind raced, his mother's looming presence, the political factions twisting like vipers in the court, and the dark secrets the Maid carried all converged like thunderclouds ready to burst. He turned his eyes back to her, searching for the resolve beneath the delicate tremor of her hands. "We stand on the edge of ruin," he whispered, "yet I will not let them tear us apart." Her breath caught, a fragile tremor giving way to determination etched deep in her gaze. "Then we fight, together." The moment stretched thin, between defiance and surrender, until a sharp rap shattered the tense silence. A servant's hurried footsteps brought forth a sealed parchment, delivered with trembling hands. The Sheikh took it, eyes scanning the scrawled ink that spelled danger anew, a coded warning revealing the smuggler's next move, peril closing like the tightening noose around them. His pulse quickened, but beneath the rising storm a fierce certainty blazed. This was no longer about escaping duty or political games. It was about survival, about claiming a future that neither tradition nor betrayal could deny. The maid's face paled as she read the note over his shoulder. "They are closer than we feared," she whispered. "If they find me, find us, everything will burn." The sheikh stepped forward, his voice a vow carved in steel and fire. "Then we burn with them." Their hands brushed, a fleeting fire sparking between trembling fingers. His eyes, storm-dark and raw, held hers with a silent promise. Against the tides of power, secrets, and bloodlines, they would defy their destinies. But just as the fragile flame kindled, the chamber's shadows deepened. From the depths of the palace, a sound echoed. Soft footfalls, deliberate and slow. The sheikh's gaze snapped toward the heavy curtains, where the light faltered. A figure emerged, veiled in silence, but unmistakable in authority. The emir of a neighboring land, an old ally turned adversary, stood at the threshold. His eyes gleamed with a cold purpose, and behind that glance lay threats far deadlier than court gossip or familial wrath. "The game has become perilous, Sheikh." The stranger's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Your choices draw lines in the sand that cannot be erased." The room contracted into a suffocating storm. The promise of war beyond walls, and love tested by forces that neither silk nor gold could shield. The sheikh's heart thundered, and beneath the weight of crowns and secrets, a single truth crystallized with brutal clarity. The stakes were no longer just his heart. They were the future of an entire empire. And among the whispered veils of power and betrayal, one question burned sharper than any blade. Was love enough to survive the coming storm? The soft rustle of silk and the distant clatter of hooves echoed faintly through the towering marble halls, yet inside the chamber, time seemed to slow to a suffocating halt. The sheikh's gaze lingered on the sealed parchment, crumpled slightly in his palm. The cryptic warning, a knife twisting between the layers of his carefully constructed life. Every shadow in the room deepened, swallowing the flickering candlelight like a tide creeping over sun-baked sands. His breath remained steady on the surface, but beneath, a storm raged, a tempest born from shattered trust and encroaching threats. The maid stood beside him, her posture unyielding, though her fingers trembled slightly as the weight of secrets clung to her like a second skin. Their shared defiance tangled with fear, each heartbeat a delicate thread binding destinies that were never meant to intertwine. The sheikh's dark eyes swept over the woman who had become his shield as much as his vulnerability. Her name was still unspoken between their stolen moments, yet it carried the weight of all that had been left unsaid. Betrayals, sacrifices, and the spark of something dangerously akin to hope. Within the cold fortress of his heart, a crack had begun to form, widening with every stolen glance and whispered confession. "Tell me everything," he demanded, voice low and rough like desert wind against stone. "No more shadows, no more silence." She met his gaze, sharp, resolute, and for a heartbeat, the distance between master and maid seemed to vanish, swept away by currents of desperation and cautious trust. "His name is Khalid," she confessed. Voice taut. "A man I fled long ago. More than a smuggler, he's a leash tightened around my throat. Once I made a mistake, a choice that shadowed my every step." The Sheikh's jaw clenched, the cold fire of anger mingling with a reluctant understanding. His mind raced. Political games, palace intrigues, and now the peril brought by a hunted past he hadn't anticipated. The entire empire, with its gold-threaded veils and whispered secrets, suddenly seemed fragile as glass beneath the weight of this revelation. Outside, the desert winds whispered a mournful dirge, as if the earth itself mourned what was to come. His voice softened, yet held an iron edge. "And you came here seeking refuge, but in this palace, refuge is as elusive as a mirage." She swallowed the lump in her throat, eyes flickering with a fire that both kindled and terrified. "I never wished for this life, to be a pawn or a secret. I wanted freedom." Her lips quivered, but she forced the words out. "And I am prepared to fight for it, no matter the cost." Their private stand was broken, suddenly, by the shrill ring of the palace bell, a summons that echoed like a prologue to war. The heavy doors creaked open, intruders in silk and steel, filling the room with tension thick enough to choke. Courtiers, cloaked in loyalties both open and veiled, crowded the edges of the chamber, eyes alight with suspicion and curiosity. At their forefront, a man stepped forward, a distant cousin of the Sheikh, known for his sharp tongue and colder ambitions. His gaze flicked from the maid to the Sheikh with veiled accusation. "Your Highness," he began, voice smooth but edged with venom, "the whispers have become a tempest. A liaison so unthinkable in our house can no longer hide in shadows." The Sheikh's fingers tightened reflexively around the parchment. The accusation was both blade and chain, his jaw set firm under the weight of generations. "Shadows often conceal truths you refuse to see," the Sheikh shot back, his tone cutting through the murmurs like a scimitar's edge. "This is not a folly, but a reckoning. We are bound by blood and duty, but not always by obedience." The maid's eyes flashed with defiance, a silent promise that she would not be a casualty to the palace's ruthless ambitions. Yet beneath her boldness, the flicker of vulnerability remained, a reminder of the price they both risked. The distant clatter of hooves returned, heralding not just messengers, but the weight of consequence galloping through the corridors. A servant's hurried footsteps brought a fresh scroll, the wax still warm, a summons from the council. An emergency session convened by the emir himself, called to address the scandal and the shadow it cast on the political alliances so desperately woven. The Sheikh's gaze hardened. The fragile balance they had so precariously maintained was teetering on the edge of collapse. He turned sharply to the maid. "This is no longer your past, or my rebellion alone. We are pawns in a game where the stakes are kingdoms and hearts alike." Her breath caught, eyes wide but steady, as the dunes under a burning sun. "Then what do we become?" "Enemies to some," he whispered, stepping close so his words brushed her ear like a vow. But together, the force that changes everything. As the council's emissaries gathered beyond the carved doors, plotting the demise or salvation of his secret alliance, the Sheikh felt the cold slide of inevitability. The desert night waited outside, vast and unyielding, but the real storm had already taken root within, and beneath the weight of crowns, lies, and forbidden desires, a single truth burned clear and merciless. The Sheikh's heart was no longer his own to command. It belonged to the maid, who carried the darkness of a past they both could no longer outrun. And the next dawn promised either salvation or ruin for all they had dared to hope. The chilling voice of the emir's envoy still echoed in the vast hall, as the Sheikh's gaze lingered on the sealed parchment in his hand. A cruel summons wrapped in urgency. Every breath in the palace stilled, the opulent chamber suffused with a tense silence that seemed to press upon them like the desert sun crushing the dunes outside. Beside him, the maid's normally steady posture betrayed a tremor beneath her composed facade. Her fingers clenched at her sides, knuckles white beneath the delicate fabric of her sleeve. The weight of the past tightening its grip with every stolen moment. The palace, a monument to power and tradition, had transformed into a prison of whispered threats and unrelenting shadows. He stepped forward, the glint of gold embroidery catching the flicker of chandelier light, grounding himself against the tidal wave of court intrigue. His voice was raw, yet steady, carrying the promise of steel wrapped in wildfire. This is no longer a game we can afford to lose. Her eyes met his, shining with a fierce defiance born from every narrow escape and silent sacrifice she had endured. They chase phantoms of my past, but I will not let them shackle my future, she whispered, voice taut with resolve. The air between them thickened, charged with the tension of unspoken promises and the fragile trust that had taken root in their unlikely alliance. The Sheikh's heart, once armored in cold calculation, found itself breaking free, pulled toward the woman who was both his refuge and his reckoning. Suddenly, footsteps echoed sharply through the marble corridors, urgent, deliberate. The heavy oak doors burst open, revealing a contingent of palace guards, led by a stern-faced man whose eyes burned with unreadable intentions. Without a word, he approached, extending a second sealed letter to V. Sheikh. Unfolding the message, the Sheikh's dark eyes scanned the contents, every line a thread pulling tighter the web of peril. The smuggler, Khalid, had been spotted near the outer gates, moving with allies under the cover of darkness. This was no mere shadow from the past trailing them. It was a storm, converging fast, destined to engulf the palace and the fragile alliance within. A slow breath escaped the maid's lips as she grasped the magnitude of the situation. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, briefly touching his arm, not for comfort, but for strength. They're coming for me, for us. The Sheikh's jaw tightened, rage and protectiveness colliding beneath his stoic mask. Then we show them the strength they never expected. The servants' whispers grew louder beyond the doors. carrying currents of danger and gossip that threatened to drown the silence between them. The echoing halls seemed to close in, the air suffocating beneath centuries of tradition, now cracking under pressure. He led her to the grand window overlooking the endless desert, the cool night air brushing in briefly, a fleeting taste of freedom beyond the gilded cage. His gaze swept the dark horizon, unsettled by the shadows moving just out of sight. Turning to her, the Sheikh's voice was a husky whisper, carrying a raw vulnerability rarely offered. I promised you protection, yet I fear my walls may not hold against the coming tide. Her eyes searched his, fierce and unyielding, despite the creeping doubt. You are stronger than the walls you build, and I am no longer the frightened girl who crossed your threshold. A fragile smile flickered at the edge of his lips, a fleeting crack in the armor of destiny. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a world beyond the suffocating chains of duty and deception. But as their hands intertwined, the heavy doors of the chamber swung open once more. The figure that entered was draped in the silk of authority and the cold certainty of power. The Sheikh's own mother, her sharp gaze, locked onto them, scrutinizing the bond that had formed beneath palatial illusions. You tread dangerous ground, her voice was steel wrapped in silk, echoing off the marble walls. This reckless defiance will bring ruin upon us all. The Sheikh met her gaze with unyielding resolve. Perhaps it is the ruin of old traditions we need, Mother. Perhaps it is time for new blood to write the future. The mother's eyes flashed with both fury and a trace of reluctant respect. The unspoken war between bloodline and desire laid bare before the court's silent witnesses. The maid stood taller than ever, no longer a mere pawn, but a formidable queen in waiting, her past a hidden storm ready to be unleashed. As the three figures faced each other in the grand hall shadowed by centuries, the fragile threads that held palace, power, and passion together began to fray. Outside, the desert wind howled mournfully, carrying with it a single ominous truth. No secret, no alliance, and no love born in deception could survive the storms gathering on the horizon. And in the deepest silence before the tempest, the Sheikh's heart thundered with one unmistakable dread. The woman he had come to cherish might be the spark that ignites the empire's destruction. The first light of dawn spilled gently over the vast expanse of the emirate, casting a soft golden glow across the palace gardens. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and freshly blossomed roses, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had gripped the halls just hours before. In this moment of fragile peace, the billionaire sheikh stood at the window of his private chamber, the weight of recent days etched into the lines of his face, yet softened by a quiet resolve that had never before been seen in him. Behind him, the woman who once bore the title of Maid now moved with the grace of a queen. Her journey from shadow to light had been perilous, marked by secrets and dangers that had threatened not only her, but the entire emirate. Yet here she stood, steady and unbroken, her eyes reflecting both the trials past and the hope of a future forged together. When she approached, the sheikh turned, a tender smile breaking the solemnity. "The dawn never promised us ease," he murmured, his voice low yet warm. but it always offers a chance. Her fingers found his, weaving strength into their intertwined hands. With you, I believe this chance is ours to seize. The palace, once a labyrinth of suspicion and silken shadows, had been transformed through courage and honesty. His mother's fierce opposition, the scheming courtiers, the looming threat of enemies outside the walls, all had been met not with submission, but defiance, tempered by wisdom and newfound solidarity. The arranged marriage that once shackled him was no more than a memory, a relic shattered by the undeniable power of their bond. Outside, the gardens blossomed, a living symbol of renewal. The fountain's gentle murmur blended with the soft rustling of leaves, a serenade to a love that had grown in the unlikeliest of places. The sheikh studied the woman beside him, no longer through guarded eyes, but in admiration. Her strength and vulnerability coexisted like light and shadow, intricate and inseparable. "I have spent years bound by duty," he confessed, "but embracing you has taught me what freedom truly means." His gaze lingered on the sincerity shimmering in her eyes, the promise they both carried beyond the walls of tradition. She stepped closer, courage blooming in the warmth between them. "And I have learned that the past does not define us. It is the choices we make now that carve our destiny." Together, they faced the window, watching as the sun rose higher, painting the desert sands in hues of amber and rose. The empire stretched before them, vast, ancient, and filled with possibilities newly awakened by their courage. In the quiet moments that followed, the sheikh's mind turned to the whispers of court and the faces of those who once doubted. He knew reconciliation would take time, but with her by his side, he felt capable of bridging worlds, the old and new, power and love, tradition and change. Footsteps approached softly, the sheikh's mother entering the room, regal and composed, yet the harsh lines of her frown softened by an unexpected understanding. Her eyes, once cold with disapproval, now held a grudging respect born from witnessing the unbreakable bond between her son and the woman he had chosen. "You have changed the course of this house." Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of a matriarch accepting the inevitable. "Perhaps this is the strength we needed." The maids, no longer maid, but partners, hearts swelled with a mixture of relief and triumph. The walls that had once confined them were crumbling, making way for a future where love was no longer a secret whispered behind closed doors, but a beacon shining across the sands. As the day stretched forward, the palace buzzed with renewed life. Courtiers exchanged knowing glances, alliances shifted, and the empire itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting a new era shaped not by obligation alone, but by passion, honesty, and courage. In the embrace of this transformation, the sheikh and the woman who had become his truest companion shared a quiet moment. Their eyes met. No words needed, only the profound understanding born from trials endured and dreams dared. The sun rose, relentless and radiant, heralding the beginning of all that was yet to come. And in that dawn's golden light, two hearts beat as one, ready to face forever together beyond the confines of destiny and duty. crafting a love story worthy of legend and memory.